afternoon. Welcome to this fireside chat. My name is Xiaofeng Wang. I'm Senior Analyst serving B2C marketing professionals at Forrester Research. So my research focuses is digital marketing, how companies can leverage digital technologies to better engage with consumers. Adam and Subra, welcome to this fireside chat. So first of all, can you introduce a little bit of yourself, your company, what you do? Thank you.
Sure, Xiaofeng. Thanks for having me here. I'm Adam. My name is Mohamed Adam Wee Abdullah, but address me by Adam is fine. I take care of the group marketing and group customer experience for CIMB Group across the region, predominantly the ASEAN markets, and I oversee the full spectrum of the marketing function basically.
So your title is CMO, right? But you also look after customer experience.
I do have two titles because they are, in fact, distinctively different sort of disciplines that requires different tools, different skill sets, different techniques in terms of the approach.
Right.
One deals with the external where we make promises to customers, and the other one, the customer experience function, actually make sure that the organization is able to deliver on those promises. So they are complementary roles, but essentially quite different.
Wow, yeah, that's the new trend. Like CMO looks after customer experience, and they become like a CGO or CXO. Yeah, they become like look after customer experience.
There's just too many acronyms for the C role nowadays.
Yeah, great. Good to have you here today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Subra, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me here, Xiaofeng. So I'm Subra Krishnan. I'm the CEO of Lemnisk. Lemnisk is a growth marketing company. We help finance marketers increase their digital share of business. We do this doing through two or three very specific things. Number one, we help finance marketers bring together their customer and marketing data in one place. And then we allow them to really slice and dice this data and apply a lot of algorithms on top of this data to help them understand this data and drive better insights out of it. And finally, we also, using the platform that we have, we allow them to really create tailored, hyper-personalized experience for their end customers. So it's essentially, think of it as a single platform that does all of these three things. Both Forrester and sort of analyst community is certainly starting to call this out as a distinct category in and of itself. What we do sort of falls under the category of a CDP or a customer data platform, although I'm loath to use three-digit acronyms as well, whether it's in the case of titles or whether it's in the case of technology. But for convenience sake, I guess you could sort of position us as a CDP.
Yeah. So today we will just talk about data-driven marketing and how does that help marketers to drive business growth. So my first question is, because today consumers, their behaviors are changing very, very fast, especially in Asia Pacific. Like they use mobile phones a lot. Everyone calls it mobile first economy, and their customer journey is getting more and more complex. They are breaking down the boundaries between online and offline. They are very digitally savvy. They access lots of information. They can make their own decisions. At Forrester, we call this type of customers as empowered consumers. And so for Adam, how do you see those type of consumers brought new challenges in marketing, and how do you handle those challenges?
Well, I tend to look at it differently. I think it's really exciting. I've seen some recent data across the ASEAN countries, and indeed true. The penetration of mobile devices, smartphones, are exceeding 90% of the marketplace, and in many countries that even exceeds the internet penetration. So what it goes to show is that consumers today have equal access to data, to information, to technology, and it certainly presents a wonderful opportunity for marketers for one very simple reason. In the past, we've always used quite a fair bit of instinct in terms of decisioning on marketing. With data or digital strategies, we are able to associate successes right across the entire marketing value chain, from the time you become aware to the time you're reinforced with relevance to the time you're converted to a customer,
Right.
and right through your entire lifetime journey with the services or the products basically.
Yeah.
Marketers today can actually map up this journey and basically apply digital platforms to capture data points to understand what's going on in our customer's life. So I think as opposed to the challenges that most people
Yeah.
feel,
It's
rather
more like
the digital
opportunity.
revolution is actually presenting a lot of wonderful opportunities to finally be able to track and measure marketing effectively.
Yeah, that's a great point of view. Yeah, it's more like an opportunity than challenges. Then you have more data about consumers, you get
Yeah.
a better chance to understand them and forecast their next moves, right?
Certainly. I mean,
Yeah.
in the past, we had to do research to sort of capture and understand what awareness levels for the brands are, top of mind measures, etc. But today, we can actually initiate a lot of campaigns and get readings instantly and understand conversion points.
Right.
We can understand awareness through impressions, for example. We can understand relevance through click-throughs.
Yeah.
And we can certainly capture usage through the conversion.
Yeah.
And the more we're able to plug in the ecosystem, the better we're able to measure success and associate it to the business matrix as well.
Yeah, so data certainly plays a very important role in understanding consumers today and engage with them. And Subra, so because you help marketers to provide better data solutions, can you talk a little bit about what your technology solutions and how can you help marketers to leverage data to form a better decision-making process?
Yeah, so I think in a way our job is a little bit easier than probably Adam's, because I think the good thing is that, and this is true of all the great marketers that we've worked with, they already understand their consumers really, really well. They understand their domain well, they understand their customers well, and to that extent they understand, and he was talking about how customers are looking at their journeys. So I think marketers understand their journeys very well as well, and by extension therefore marketers also understand the sort of data that they need, right? So to a large extent, within every domain, whether it's banking or insurance, we see that CMOs and marketing leaders are able to articulate the data that they need, the sort of frequency at which they need it, the context in which they need it. All of that is pretty well known within, the marketer is able to express it, let me put it that way. So therefore, our job as a technology provider, as a technology partner, is essentially to facilitate this process, right? So that's why I'm saying it's technology at the end, and therefore it's probably one notch easier, because understanding the insight is probably harder. So from our focus, therefore, a lot of what we do is, can I provide a platform to the marketer that is consistently able to provide reliable data, that is able to provide real-time data within very strict SLAs? Is it easily accessible to all downstream marketing ecosystems, right? Can I add domain-specific context, which I get from marketers, and actually create accelerators which can reduce time to value? What sort of value-added segmentation, analytics, algorithms, and other features can I add on the platform that can make the marketer's life easier, and that allows them to really extract the insight out of it and action it? So a lot of what we do at Lemnisk really is about enabling this for finance marketers.
Yeah. So technology can help marketers to leverage the data and maximize the benefits of data-driven marketing. But first of all, marketers, they have to collect the data and they have to understand what kind of data they use. So Adam, like you mentioned, you actually collect a lot of data and you will be able to see a single view of customer. And so can you talk about what kind of data you actually collect, and what are the data sources you use, and how do you clean, structure, and use those data? Do you see any challenges? Do you see any gaps? Yeah.
That's a very good question, Xiaofeng. I think if you actually look at quite a lot of sectors, and banking included, we are actually sitting on a gold mine of data.
Yeah, you have lots of data.
We have a lot of data, and if you understand the context of big data and what it entails, volume alone is not enough.
Yeah.
Subra mentioned velocity earlier, so velocity is also important. Variety of data is important, and I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about variety of data, because in the banking sector we have variety of data that's not available in any other sector. And these are actually data of real consumption that is offline, which is available in a digital form. And what I'm actually alluding to is the fact that our consumers actually really consume maybe 15% of the time online, and the rest of their online activities are really relegated to social activities, to a bit of work, entertainment as well, and some other activities. So if you divide up the time they actually are online, it's really representative of maybe 15% of their time that they are involved in some kind of a commercial decision, whether they're searching for a product or whether they are actually making a purchase. Now, if you think about it from that context, and if you look at it from a GDP point of view, digital commerce basically makes up anywhere between 15 to 20% of some economies, depending on which country you're looking at. And what that really means is 80% or more of the time consumption is actually happening offline. And in banking we have that data. We have that information, which when applied really enriches our understanding of the customers. And we are able to actually use the big data platform to basically analyze and understand propensities of the customers at very different levels, to be able to contextualize services and products much better, to make it relevant for our customers. So as far as big data opportunities are concerned, I think in the past we have not been able to have an external channel for us to be able to do that orchestration of reaching out to the audience, using technology to assist us in terms of the delivery, and as well as enriching the data through secondary information like what sites do you go to, and what interests do you have, and where do you like to go for holidays. Now these are information that are actually complementary to what we already have in terms of actual consumption data.
Right.
So that is the part that wasn't really available in the past, and that's the part which in more recent times we have actually activated. And when we have activated this piece of this area of data, we are able to see some significant improvements in the way we actually deploy digital marketing. So if I were to give an example, we looked at digital campaigns and capture a baseline of click-through rates through normal ad placements. And we originally collected data that tells us our click-through rate was about 13%. We then went ahead and did segmentation and understood the customer's behavior and matched that against other variety of information that we have of the customers. And we took that and we looked for lookalike audiences, or rather custom audience. And when we layered that onto our campaign and deployed it out there, we were able to improve click-through rates beyond 39%. And that's easily 3 times better results once we understood the customers and served them the right relevant piece of information. They will respond.
Right. And you see the results immediately.
Yeah, we do see the results, and we run quite a lot of pilots, A/B testings to basically understand what's going to work better for the customers and what's not going to work so well for them. Right.
So how long it took you to start collecting data and put data together until like you can actually generate some business results out of it?
I think very quickly, because we already started off from a base of having enormous amount of data. And those are basically additional complementary data that we collect from the web, which we previously didn't have.
Right.
In that sense. So as far as deployment is concerned, I think we saw the results almost immediately.
Well, so Subra, did you help CIMB to imply those data platforms? So, and you witnessed the entire journey of their data-driven marketing process. So how did you participate? And, yeah.
And that's a great question. So in fact, we have seen worked closely with Adam and CIMB for a while now, and therefore we have been a very intrinsic part of this journey. We've understood their vision, and obviously a lot of what Adam says and his vision and what the team tries to achieve is sort of very much aligned with our technology and what we are trying to do as well. So to that extent, it was a sort of a good fit. And the way we have tried to sort of help CIMB is, again, if you go back to the framework that I used before, the first step is to really bring together sources of data in one place. So in this case, I can clearly call out 3 different sources of data. So number one is the sort of first party data, as it's called, getting generated from CIMB's website, as well as offline data sets that they have. Third party audience data, of course. And then interestingly, which you could probably club with first party data, is the marketing channel response that we were getting from the different marketing channels, right? So we could bring all of that together and make it available for analytics and actioning. And one of the really interesting use cases that worked fabulously well in the case of CIMB is this notion of algorithmic orchestration, as we call it, which is, we actually power multiple channels for CIMB right now. We power, for example, the homepage and some of the internal pages on their website. We power a technology called browser push notifications. We also run programmatic campaigns as well as some Facebook campaigns. And so when you think of a marketing segment, and let's say there are 100,000 users in that segment, the traditional way of really driving journeys, as it's called within that segment, is to take that 100,000 and maybe send them an email, wait 24 hours, and then maybe send them an SMS or send them a browser push. So that's sort of how journeys are crafted. Whereas with algorithmic orchestration, each one of those 100,000 users are, because they're hooked into these channels that we are powering, we are able to identify what channel is a particular user more likely to respond in, what is the second best channel, what times. And I think the algorithm, which essentially uses a recurrent neural network as it's called, RNN, was able to understand these propensities at a single user level. So as opposed to a journey that takes the entire segment along with it, in this case, the moment the segment is launched, you can imagine 100,000 journeys exploding out and each user really getting taken on their own journey. It's very fascinating for us to apply this, especially in CIMB's context, not least because of, as Adam also pointed out, the amount of data that we had. And that made it really very, very fascinating for us. And the results, again, we did very structured segment A/B tests. So we, and I think Adam is also a fan of that. And we were able to prove very meaningful lift, both in terms of engagement as well as in terms of conversions measured in the form of lead submissions, as it's called.
Yeah. So clearly, data-driven marketing can drive better marketing performances and business outcomes. So another question we raise is, how do you balance data? Because you use lots of data to provide a personalized brand experience to consumers, but consumers nowadays, they are more aware about their data privacy, and regulations are getting more and more mature in the region as well. So how do you balance personalization and privacy, and how do you define a line between personal and too personal? So I will start with you, Adam.
Sure. I think that's a very interesting question, and it's probably worthwhile for us to address the whole notion of personalization. Different parties understand that differently. To the consumers, there is obviously a fear of intrusion into their personal space. For me, it's actually very simple. I don't need to know your name to market to you something.
Yeah.
And therefore, in a lot of our deployment, we basically keep it non-intrusive. And the reason why we crunch so much data is so that we can understand your requirements much better. And if you want to be left alone and you have not given us permission to market to you, we will not. I think it's very important for marketers to respect that privacy, and which is what a lot of the regulations are out there to achieve, to make sure that brands and businesses and marketers basically comply and respect consumers' privacy. We do not use personally identifiable information in our analysis because that is less important. In most cases, personally identifiable information like your name, your phone number, your address, and things like that are not very necessary in most remarketing circumstances. Because your behavior, what you like, your propensity are actually a lot more important. So we basically apply a different approach in terms of our remarketing. So there are distinctions in terms of the sort of programs we deploy or communications that we deploy to customers. Number one is it a notification that's important to you and only for you?
Relevancy, right?
Yes. If that's the case, then we will address you personally and send that only to you. On other aspect, you basically live your life as a customer, pretty much not thinking about banking. So you think about buying a house, you think about buying a car, you think about getting married, and you need financial services or products in some of these circumstances. We apply big data to be able to serve you the right sort of proposition at the right time when you need it. So that's really how we are using the data, not so much to intrude into your space, but to surprise you and pleasantly make you an offer when you need it. So that results in a more positive customer experience ultimately. And the better we refine the data, the better the experience will be for the customers.
So you always provide transparency to your customers. How did you collect their data and how will you use them?
You're probably citing some of the strict requirements from GDPR. Because that sounds vaguely familiar. I think a lot of organizations in Asia are probably not GDPR ready. And I think even when Europe implemented it, I think it was May this year that the law kicked in. I remember the date quite distinctively. I think it was 28th of May. Because there was a lot of noise amongst tech companies, amongst brands in Europe as well, because they were not ready for it. The important thing is actually data record keeping. We need to capture the permissions given to us by the customers. The implication for marketing is that we have to constantly seek this permission as we actually engage with the customers. And we have to constantly keep this record that they've given to us as well, because we have to appreciate the fact that our customers are being spammed with a lot of information and advertising, not only on the digital platform but as offline as well. And they don't exactly remember when they've given us the permission.
Yes. Yeah.
So we do have to keep this record so that we are in compliance with regulations and we are not infringing on any of the customer rights. Yeah.
And when you are using third-party data, you need to make sure the data partners or data providers, they have to be compliant with those technologies.
To be honest, we do not use too much of the third-party data. In fact, I don't believe in third-party data. One of the important thing about data management or data analysis is recency. The rule of recency is actually very important. And when you have third-party data, you really don't know the background of it. And third-party data also doesn't comply with another rule of big data, data veracity. How much of those data are actually useful, and how much of those data are actually noise, right? So we find that in most instances when you actually pump data into all these fancy algorithm and terminologies that Subra uses, we really only need to use data that are useful, that can actually give us a good steer in terms of better insights, give us a good steer in terms of channel propensity, not only in terms of channel propensity to reach them through our advertising, but also channel propensity to serve them. And we also want to use data that gives us a better contextual understanding of where customers are doing what, so that we can actually find the right sort of opportunities to make an offer on a proposition that they need.
Definitely start collecting data with a purpose. Like you have your marketing agenda, marketing purpose behind that, how you want to use the data, what kind of goals you want to achieve.
I think you use a very important keyword here, the purpose.
Yeah.
Defining the purpose of why you need the data and what you're going to use it for, and what we want to achieve with the customer needs to be upfront. We need to be clear about that in order for us to be able to actually measure whether we are achieving the outcome.
Yes.
So this again goes back to the first question you asked in terms of why I said data is so, this digital age is so exciting, because we can actually measure quite a lot of things now if we map the journey in its completeness, basically.
Definitely. Okay, so Subra, what's your point of view about data privacy?
Yeah, I think it was Steve Jobs that gave a very memorable sort of definition to this when he said, privacy is about letting people know what they're signing up for in plain English and repeatedly, right? So I think a lot of what I can, I think CIMB Bank really does a terrific job of this, if you ask me. And the reason for that is because I think privacy as a concept is deeply ingrained into the organization culture, and when that happens, it sort of infuses itself automatically into day-to-day business conversations and day-to-day business decisions, right? So I think GDPR that way is a great start. It's very pro-consumer, and I think, and like I said, it's just a start. I certainly believe that there are going to be more evolving norms that are going to come up, all of which is going to be pro-consumer, which is right and exactly the way it should be. Now, what sort of onus does it place on vendor partners like Lemnisk? And I think that is a very important thing to understand as well. And I think the first one, which is sort of not so intuitive, but I think is really the most important thing here, is to understand and acknowledge the cost of privacy and build it into the platform, right? And I've seen this personally in our journey as well, where in day-to-day sort of scenarios, when you're building a feature, when you're executing on your product roadmap, it's very, very easy to sort of prioritize features that are not prioritize speed, for instance, right? Or prioritize features that are always pro performance, right? Whereas in certain cases you do have to take a step back and acknowledge that you may be slowed down. The product development process might actually slow down if you incorporate the appropriate amounts of privacy into your development processes. And I think people always talk of walking that thin line, or the other phrase that I've heard is the gray area that people have to tread. I don't agree with that. And I think we're talking black and white. If you take a pro-consumer stance, then I think it's very black and very white. I think, like, for example, Adam was referring to, I don't need PII to do my analysis. So come what may, I don't need to use it. It's as simple as that, right? So when you take a stance like that, all of your other decision making, all of your other processes automatically align with something like this, right? So I think, we have come a long way since maybe even as recent as a decade back in terms of understanding and implementing consumer privacy. And GDPR, as I said, is a great start. But I really do believe that we will become more and more pro-consumer as we go along.
So I've talked to lots of marketers in the region, and the majority of them would like to invest more in technology and data so they can improve their marketing performances and drive business growth. So for Adam at CIMB, what kind of marketing technologies are you investing, or do you want to invest or evaluating, and what are the key criteria you use to evaluate those technologies or solution providers?
I probably don't want to be too specific about what we require today, but I would probably suggest a piece of advice for marketers who are exploring technology. That is simply to not jump into the technology bandwagon just because something is current, just because something is trending right now. Doesn't mean that speed in terms of jumping into adopting those technologies will actually get any sort of benefits. It is important for them to understand why they need those technologies in the first place. It always boils down to solving business problems and also solving customer problems. That is the premise that we'll probably have to go with, and most people dive into technologies is because they basically have not invested enough time to understand what that technology is and where it's going to help the business. So spend more time in terms of researching and build up scenarios and have clear hypotheses or proof of concepts that you want to run, and find a partner who is actually willing to do that, to be able to give you that information, make you understand things better, and help you drive some of these proof of concepts as well, and take baby steps. Take one step at a time to actually build up capabilities, because the biggest transformation is actually not so much the adoption of technology. The biggest transformation is actually a mindset shift in the organization. And can you imagine what the impact is if you're talking about large organizations such as ours with 36,000 employees? In order to move the organization to a digitally transformed state of awareness, we have to invest in quite a fair bit of training. And as recent as May this year, we actually launched an academy we call the 3D Academy, which basically represents digital, data, and disruption. Right? And that academy was put in place to train all 36,000 of our employees to be a little bit more aware and competent about the technology space that we have to adapt to. So getting the organization ready is not just an investment in the technology itself, but in the investment in the people. And getting them to the right state of knowledge, because at the end of the day, you might just discover some very important skills and talents amongst your own employee group that can help you with this digital transformation journey.
Yeah, that's actually my last question is about the challenge lies in you don't have enough talent who knows marketing as well as data and technology well enough. And you talk about your journey of internal education, training process. And how about your collaboration with Subra and how Lemnisk helped you guys to implement and educate your employees to deliver better outcomes?
I think it comes in the package solution that Lemnisk has proposed to us, because the marketers need to be trained on the tool.
Right.
And that's really where the requirement for a full solution comes in. Not only is the technology in play, but I think the advantage of working together with a company that's willing to listen to your challenges is that we're able to customize how we move forward with it. And if we need a little bit more training, we'll put in a little bit more training. If we need to have more conversations to get the architecture right, we will do that.
Right.
So I think it's an iterative process moving forward. It's not powered by technology per se. Technology per se is code. It is what you do with the technology to actually create a value for the organization that is actually most important.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I had answered your last question.
It's totally related, right? It's about like how companies, they need to transform internally, no matter from organizational structure or get their talents ready, right?
Yes.
It's
so mindset readiness first, technology second.
Yeah.
If you let technology lead the transformation, you might not know that you've achieved success or failure because you haven't quite defined what the purpose is and what the expected outcome is.
Right.
So link that two parts up to be able to formulate what the right solution is. Technology is an enabler. I think Subra mentioned it earlier as well. At the end of the day, that is how we should see it.
Yeah. So Subra, from a vendor's perspective, do you see any key challenges in implementation in terms of new technology solutions, and are there any barriers for companies internally to embrace new technologies?
Yeah, so I think I would look at this in two parts. First and foremost is that, and I think Adam covered this as well, is that the organization first needs to have a mindset shift.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I think they need to, and I think you stole some of my lines there. I was going to use words like iterative myself, and oftentimes it's about taking a very use case centric approach. It's not that, I quite often see companies and marketers getting dragged into, I need technology with a 3-digit acronym. It could be whatever 3-digit acronym. But I think what works better is if you have listed out the use cases, right? Yeah, I want to make sure that when there's an existing customer that visits my website and looks at a credit card, I want to be able to latch on to that signal and send him or her an email, right, instantly, right? And that when you think like that, it forces you to really think about what you need to make it happen. In this case, your email ecosystem, your website ecosystem, your offline next best offer ecosystem, and your CRM ID systems really need to be connected and talk to each other. So easier said than done. And that's where you really start thinking in terms of how can I make that happen. And then you probably hit upon this notion of, there is this package software which is designed to exactly do that. And so therefore, can I get that package software in place? Can I start off with this use case, look at the value that I'm generating, do POCs as Adam said, and then move to the next use case and then to the next, and so on and so forth, right? So the first is about, as I said, mindset, and then the notion of adoption. I think from a vendor standpoint, one of the calls that we took is that we said that we're going to partner marketers all the way through the value creation process, from implementation all the way through value creation. And that's a very conscious choice we took, because we believe that a lot of the technology that we're building right now is very genuinely at the cutting edge of digital marketing. And oftentimes the knowledge that's required to sort of implement and use this technology effectively just keeps changing very dramatically, right? So it's important that we take a partnership approach. We see many marketing technology implementations also failing because they go into this big bang implementations, multi-year, there's a sale that happens of a marketing technology into an organization, and then there is this big sort of company that comes in to implement that, and then it really gets into multi-quarter implementations, which is good, but ultimately many of those may not yield results. It's not going to help Adam meet his next quarter's goals, right? So whereas if you take a use case centric approach, which is very clear again in Adam and his team's head, for instance, right? So then it becomes a lot more easier. You come in with a technology that's geared to do many things, but you start with something small and work your way up from there. So from our perspective, to summarize, we sort of partner all the way through to value creation, and that's worked very well for us.
Great. So what are the key use cases CIMB and Lemnisk define together are most important to like financial companies in the region?
So I would say, so there are 2 or 3 use cases that I would want to highlight. I touched upon one earlier in the session pertaining to algorithmic orchestration. That I think is a very, very powerful one, especially in the context of banks, because there are so many touch points that banks have compared to other domains, right? So it's important to really understand a consumer across these touch points, right? So orchestration is one. Second one that I would call out is consistent personalization. And when I say consistent, it means the ability to send the same message to the user, whether she's on your website or whether she's on programmatic or whether she's on email, right? So can you do that, right? So consistent personalization is another use case. So I think these are the two sort of use cases that I believe are very powerful that we've offered to CIMB as well.
And CIMB have applied or these 2 use scenarios into business already, and you shared some of the business outcomes. So it seems quite positive. So do you have any plan in the next few years to better leverage data, and what are you planning to do?
I think it's a constant journey to improve ourselves and to improve the way we actually use data and also our deployment. New technologies are always coming on board. Every single year, every single month, you always find that there's always a technology that's coming on board. We have to ready ourselves in terms of always getting excited with the possibilities to experiment with this technology within the context of having clear use cases. And once you do that, and also define technologies that are more immediate in terms of turnaround time, you're able to actually get the right value out of it. So typically in the past, when we actually do technology deployment, you're talking about a project timeline of a year, 2 years for that transformation to take place. Unfortunately, that just doesn't fly, because once you're done, it's already outdated in most cases. And I think that challenge is particularly real for the banking sector and a lot of the regulated sector, where in most cases we've had to build a lot of our technology solutions on premise. And only in recent times have we been able to deploy some opportunities that the cloud sector has actually presented itself. And this is really because we are actually very particular and clear about not having the need to use personally identifiable information. And therefore, we run no risk. Right? And that has actually given us quite a fair bit of elbow room to be able to quickly plug and play different platforms and do different sort of iterative exercises to be able to do things better.
So you mentioned mindset change, technology, and talent. So do you have any final recommendations to marketers who want to adopt data-driven marketing?
I think the best advice I can probably give is to watch the cost.
Okay.
If
Always
I don't talk
measure the
about
ROI.
if I don't talk about the cost, then I'm not a true marketeer per se.
Yeah.
I think for marketeers, it's important for us to understand where are we getting the returns from, and we do have to watch the cost. When I say watch the cost, typically in technology deployment, there is a recurring operational expenditure that always happens with adopting a piece of technology. So can you imagine if you jump the gun and jump on board the bandwagon and subscribe to all the technology that's rolling out in a marketplace, you will end up chalking up quite a fair bit of your marketing budget to just pay for all these recurring annual OPEX.
Right.
You don't want to do that. I think we have to have a certain discipline in terms of what level would be the right level that we would be comfortable in adopting as far as technology expenses are concerned.
Right.
So put aside the initial cost of deploying the technology, the ongoing sustaining cost is actually more critical because that's the bill you have to pay every single year. And if you lay up 10 technology solutions on top of that, you're going to be paying a lot of bills.
Right. Thank you,
So
Adam. Yeah.
How much
great
of that?
advice.
How much of that is actually too much? So again, link back to objective and link back to outcome to be
Right.
able to understand where you're going to get the returns.
Great advice. Thank you, Adam. So, Subra, what are your final recommendations to marketers?
Yeah, I would echo Adam's thoughts there very much. I think from Lemnisk's perspective as well, we are very, very ROI focused, and we oftentimes deliberately link ourselves to the final conversions or the final value metric that we're trying to push for the marketer. And I think that's very, very important. Whenever you adopt a technology, what metric are you really trying to move, right? That's number one. And number two is to be use case centric. As I said, have one or a set of use cases around which you're trying to implement a technology, make them a reality, iterate on them, perfect them, because then the second, third, fourth, fifth use cases become progressively easier after that. And I think the third one is that I think marketers are recognizing the need for a database that is of marketers, by marketers, and for marketers, right? So I think that is a very important step to take. I would say that oftentimes I see that digital marketing databases or one views that are being attempted are getting created inside organizations where there are multiple stakeholders really feeding into it, right? I need this out of this database, I need this out of this database. So marketing really becomes just one more stakeholder, right? As opposed to the primary stakeholder. So I think where we have seen marketers succeed tremendously is when they have been able to sort of identify for themselves an elastic, highly responsive data that they can really use to drive their use cases. So that definitely is a third closing
and prove they
recommendation.
can drive positive ROIs.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
like Adam mentioned.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. It's great to have you both today. Thank you.
Thanks, Xiaofeng.
Thanks, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.